He called me Charlie Manson. He called me Adolf Hitler. He said I'm the type of personality that can work all day and creep all night.
A stranger from the outside.
Greetings. I am Buzz Lightyear. I come in peace.
I speak on behalf of cigarettes.
My mom used to smoke. She says cigarettes kill.
Really? Now, is your mommy a doctor?
No.
A scientific researcher of some kind?
No.
Well, she doesn't exactly sound like a credible expert now, does she?
They're crap. 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 Mega crap.
I couldn't stop long enough to tell her goodbye, that I was sorry, that it was my fault.
Sorry. Thought you're making a move. Sorry. It's all right. It's all right. I thought he was making a move. Making a move. Pies. Pies for everybody. Oh, and now we're making a move.
I like that idea, though. Pies for everybody?
Pies for everyone. Well, 2 days from now, there will be pie.
There will be pie.
3 days from now?
Let there be pie.
And the Lord said, let there be pie.
Yes.
And it was good.
We can talk about pie, actually, quite a bit today, can't we?
I know I am, because I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we're the Cinemaniacs.
But my reference was, we've got like 4 movies to talk about. Whereas before, I think our record is like, we did like 16
I
once?
think 18 is the most we've ever done in one.
Yeah.
Unless you count the best worst episode from last year,
that's
where
not
we
fair.
rattled through like 35 movies in an hour.
This sucked.
Yeah. So yeah, we only have 2 in the theater and 2 on video this week. So we can be effusively, eloquently ebullient in our emancipatory exclamations on this program today.
Yes.
So we're in no rush to get to anything.
Nope.
You're here and we're here. So how you been?
I've been okay. Hey, it's not going to be that bad, is it?
No.
I've been okay. I was moderately okay in the theater for one film, and then not quite so moderately okay for another one, and we'll find out about that as we progress.
And this was the rare occasion where you and I were both in the theater at the same time
for both films.
For all the films this week.
That was weird.
Usually we never see each other at all. But usually it's by choice until we get into the studio here.
That's right.
So anyway, shall we?
We should.
If you'd care to.
I'd love to. Well, don't you need another $600 million when you're a young girl who is amongst a dozen areas that is just fraught with hunger and famine? Oops, I said the word. So, and you got to go fight everybody else and kill them so that you can feed your nation. Well, this is the second in the trilogy with Katniss Everdeen, and she's going to have to go out and fight once again in the Hunger Games. But she's just not a beginner. She's really catching fire. Well, this is certainly one where, and it was fortunate that I had the time, and my younger son Walter, who basically sees all the movies with me as long as they're not NC-17s or anything.
Including Django, right?
Unfortunately, yes, including Django. But we watched the original Hunger Games, whatever the first one was called.
I think it was called The Hunger Games.
I think it was probably just called The Hunger Games. But we watched that a couple of days ago because I was thinking, you're probably going to need to catch up to it, and I wanted to remember it a little bit. I remember in the theaters for the first Hunger Games just thinking it was really kind of silly and just playing to this audience. Boy, in the second viewing, when I saw it in video a couple of days ago, it was really pretty solid. I really liked it a lot more. It was kind of silly toward the beginning when you set all this stuff up. This one then, starts right out, and I think you could figure it out. I mean, who hasn't? This is so, and this isn't a negative comment, catering to its audience, knowing that all of these people have read this book, they know the characters, they love the characters. So, boom, it starts right out, and I think you could figure out what was going on if you hadn't seen the first one, but I really think it did help. This one is certainly much more, for want of a better term, mature, serious, kind of darker, as they take these characters and they're developing relationships. I'm going to, ultimately, I was enjoying it, and I really think I kind of like these films, but I was super disappointed in the ending, which, and I don't think, I don't think this is anything that we have to do a spoiler alert for.
Well, there kind of isn't an ending.
Well, right, it's a trilogy.
Yes.
And it reminded me, once I got over being horribly upset at how it just like stops. And, time for a third movie, I guess, because I literally, I apologize if you were in front of me, because it goes to, it cuts to black, and then like end titles come up, and I go, are you kidding me? because I was just waiting for it to keep going, but I'm looking at my watch going, man, we're like 2 hours into it. How much more can we really have? And then I realized, oh yeah, I guess it's a trilogy. But it reminded me at the end, and then eventually I'll get to say that I did like this, and then I'll let you talk, believe it or not. It reminded me of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because at the second one, The Two Towers, Frodo and Sam are like on top of some mountain, and they're looking off at Mount Doom. Ooh, we got to get over there and throw the ring in there. And then they spend 2 hours, and they're doing all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the movie, they end up on top of a mountain looking across at Mount Doom, and they say, ooh, we got to get over it. So they went like 2 linear feet throughout the entire film. And this was kind of similar. A lot of stuff happening, character development, I guess, but it's just kind of like we learn a little bit about characters, and I'll let you espouse whys on some things before I get to something that I will be asking for a spoiler alert. So ultimately, I enjoyed it. I was surprised and disappointed in not remembering that it was a trilogy. But it sure looks pretty good. The performances are real fine. I like the way they developed a lot of the characters.
I didn't see it. No, sorry. I was so-so in the original Hunger Games.
Right.
I hate to be somebody who is always comparing something newer to something older, but I saw a movie called Battle Royale years ago that I loved and really kind of was disturbing and very, very memorable to me. So when I came to the Hunger Games story, the idea of oppressive government sponsors kids killing kids on TV, that was not a fresh idea to me.
Right.
So that I wasn't blown away and shocked by the notion. So it's got to work on, for me, it's like, okay, well, what else you got? So the first one was, I really hated the way it was shot. It was hard to look at, but it was okay once it got going. This one, apparently the success of the first film has allowed them to afford to buy tripods and a Steadicam.
It must
so
have been.
None of that crap in this movie, which is great.
Right.
And it's not the exact same thing all over again in terms of the games themselves.
Right.
Which I was surprised because I don't really care to read the books, so it's all fresh for me. So the fact that I don't want to give anything away, but the participants are not the same as they were in the first film, which is interesting. What they do is interesting. But for me, I thought it was cool that they hit the ground running, because I fully expected 10 or more minutes of recap from the first film or highlights for for those of you who joined us late kind of thing. And it didn't, and I respect the fact that it respected its audience and said, if you want to know what happened in the last movie, why don't you go watch the last movie? So that was cool. But it is an hour and a half before you even get to the, as I like to say, titular Hunger Games. And for me, it was just a whole lot of, yes, the government's oppressive, they're terrible, blah, blah, blah. You know, to me, I think if you're young and you haven't experienced as long as we have, as old as we are, that many years of films about these topics, this is probably really fresh and shocking and will get you riled up. But if you haven't, then, so I have time to pause.
You do, as a matter of fact.
So yeah, the ideas in this film are not fresh to me. It took a long time to get going. Once it did get going, that for me is when it got interesting, because it's about strategies and figuring out. It reminded me of a really cool Canadian sci-fi movie called Cube from a few years ago, where people wake up in this weird structure and they have to figure out why they're there and how things work. There was a lot of that in this, and that's what I hooked on to the most. Once they get to this Danger Island or whatever you want to call it, they're figuring out, what the rules of this place are and how to try to beat the game. That was pretty cool. I knew that it was going to stop short, or that it wouldn't end the story, because I knew there were multiple books in this, but it did remind me of seeing the first of the not the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movies, where the film gets up to the point and then it just stops.
There's a dragon. Oops.
And I guess I wasn't sure there were going to be more than one film when it ended, so that was interesting. As far as the actors go, everybody in it is decent for the most part. Jennifer Lawrence kind of, it all hangs on her, and the physicality of the role she does really well in. And I can't think of his name.
The guy who plays Peeta?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he's in Josh Hutcherson. He's kind of.
Is it right?
The various teams that you find on Danger Island, Devil's Island, Death Island, they're the ones that are techies, and it's a man and a woman, and the man is
Felix Leiter,
exactly.
From Casino
He's the
Royale.
guy who plays Felix Leiter in the modern Bond films, and he's on Boardwalk Empire. I was surprised to see him in this movie, and I was happy to see him in this movie.
Yeah.
So overall, jam-packed audience when we went to see it.
Oh, absolutely.
It was a Saturday at noon, and it's very unusual for a Saturday noon show to have to stand up.
160 domestic, 300 worldwide.
Wow. And I was talking to Joe at Keene Cinemas, and he was saying they had sold out just about every show from when it opened on Thursday through Sunday when I was talking to him. A lot of young people there, some younger than you would think
Yeah.
would be appropriate
and
for this.
some so young that they had to ask questions and
Really?
have it explained. Thank you very much, parents, while it was going on.
I had a couple people behind me. Probably part of the reason why I'm maybe not a little bit higher on this is that back and to the right, there were two people, females who were old enough to know better, just carrying on a fully play-by-play for the whole movie.
Wow.
And that was driving me kind of crazy. So I actually spent the whole movie with my finger pressed up against my ear. So it's very exciting in mono, I'll give it that. Yeah, I think if you're a fan of these, anything we say won't matter. Everybody there seemed to like it a lot.
Yeah.
There's a moment of triumph for the underdog in the film where people in the crowd started cheering, which was pretty cool. At one point, the first time you see Jennifer Lawrence appear on screen, there was a preteen girl a few rows ahead of me who went, Katniss! So, I mean, these people are really into this.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed. I intentionally wanted to go to an early one because I knew we were going to have those people there. And this is a kind of like mass experience that is a lot more fun to enjoy with a whole crowd of people that just really love it. And I think that added to it. Yeah.
So you had spoilery type logical
Yes.
questions.
We haven't done spoiler alerts for quite a while, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk about some things, and if you haven't seen this film, my recommendation is that you turn the volume down. Don't turn away because we have so much more to talk about, but turn the volume down until I give you one of these. Or Mark does it, either one. And that lets you know that you can come back. But we're going to talk about some things that give away plot details and some important stuff. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you turn the volume down right now. And we'll call you. Oh, there it is. They actually have it. Good for you guys. So we have a spoiler alert. That seat, Dave and Rick are just on top of things. So we're going to talk about some stuff.
Okay.
We find out, basically you were already referring, they get to Danger Island or whatever it is, and all of this crazy stuff is going on. And we had this character beforehand. It's a different character, a different actor now, the kind of games master, who runs all of the things and coordinates animals or weird things that are going to happen. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is the games master here. Little over the top for me, as is, if we're talking about performances, as is Donald Sutherland. But we find out at the end that, and again, spoiler alert, if you're still listening, I'm going to tell you some stuff.
Going to give it all away.
We find out at the end that Philip Seymour Hoffman is really part of the rebellion. And he's coordinated all of this, and these other winners are in on helping Katniss kind of overthrow the government. And in retrospect then, I'm looking back at all of the different ways she could have so easily been killed. And I'm thinking, well, gee, why did they throw this boiling fog at her and she could have been killed? Why were they spinning this thing around and she could have been killed? So much of it in retrospect. It's a great effect, kind of a tomato surprise moment. Oh my God, this happened. But it doesn't work in retrospect. And I think that's a problem, once again, with my overall feeling of this film is that it works on a kind of a mid-range level, but it's not a real, and I don't expect it to be high concept, but its own internal logic didn't quite fit for me. I also, secondary thing too, was that we meet Katniss at the beginning of the film, and my understanding, and maybe these people who know more about the Hunger Games can explain it to me, but my understanding was you play the Hunger Games so that your district can then be awash with food. Mm-hmm. And we meet her, and she's out shooting squirrels and stuff, and it's just destitution all over the place.
And
again.
that may be to reinforce the whole idea of a government who doesn't care about its people, and they maybe make false promises.
Well, right,
maybe.
But then why weren't people complaining about that? So, anyway.
Well, they don't want to be beaten to death.
Do you have any discussion before we call them back?
Nothing that's spoilery, so we can...
You want to call them back? Okay, you can do that.
Okay.
See, that's a little zoom in. We should do one of those things as we're going like that. Okay, so anyway.
So all that stuff we just talked about that you did or didn't hear, I
you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, the butler did it.
Right.
What I like about this film is that I didn't expect that twist.
Okay.
I expected we were going to get 3 movies or 5 or whatever it is that was more or less just the same thing. You know?
Right.
Somebody has to go in the games and they fight, and she always winds up being the last one to live because she's the main character.
But I think it's
so this bend that it took, I was like, ooh. And where the movie ends, I'm really interested in seeing the next one.
Oh yeah, no,
because I know it's not going to be the same thing.
I don't argue
again.
with that. It's going to be a roller coaster when you get to the third one. Not that this needs a spoiler alert, but this big twist, this big surprise that does come at the end, for me, and for those of you who end up seeing it then, for me then, in retrospect, the internal logic of the film doesn't work for me. Because this shouldn't have happened, or whatever the case may be. Overall, I'm overanalyzing it because it was loads of fun. And overall, I think performances are real good, and she's terrific.
And a sub note about seeing people bringing little kids there.
Right.
You think the original film, it's it's about kids killing kids. So the idea of, for sport, you think bringing kids there is a really kind of bad idea. This isn't a very violent movie.
Is not?
It's not
Not as much as the
violent.
first one, I didn't think.
They
right.
really cut around all of the violence. I was surprised. I mean, there are people they have their weapons of choice, and there's hatchets, and there's all sorts of things, but you don't see a lot in the way of blood or gore, particularly. This acid fog that comes through, which is a pretty cool effect, pretty dramatic and dangerous. That was a little gruesome because people get, their skin bubbles up a little bit, but they even quite literally
wash it away.
Wash that acid right out of their hair
later. It's painful to watch.
So yeah, I mean. Again,
quick question. Were you surprised they didn't go the 3D route this time? I was, and I'm very happy that they didn't.
I'm surprised any major film is not
Doesn't
3D.
go 3D, right?
Anything that's sci-fi related, I just expect that it'll be 3D.
Right.
So the last couple of weeks, there have been a couple that have come along that weren't 3D, and I was surprised because that's more money for the studio, and it makes the film harder to bootleg. You can't shoot a camcorder off a screen because it's double vision.
That's true.
So, yeah, I would surprise. I like 3D in theory, but I think 95% of the time I don't even notice that it's in 3D once the movie starts. So it doesn't. And I don't think the brightness thing is an issue for me anymore. Early on, you notice that films look too dark because
they always look like a stop underexposed or something.
Yeah, that has not occurred to me in a really long time. So I think the studios, are maybe just bumping up the brightness of the. You won't call it print anymore. The DCP that they're sending the theaters to account for that, because I can't remember the last time that I thought, "Ooh, this looks a little under."
I'll agree. Yeah.
Speaking of a little under, if we may, Vince Vaughn is back on the scene, back on the screen as an irresponsible man in his 40s who discovers that a lot of deposits he were making at a certain kind of bank many years ago have resulted in him being the biological father of 533 children. He is. We've got time, right?
We do.
Good.
Nice pause.
The Delivery Man. So was it the best day of your life?
Oh, isn't it? It's the feel-good movie of the year.
Is it?
Somebody apparently said.
Okay. I went into this expecting a comedy from that trailer.
Right.
This isn't a comedy.
I would agree.
This has light moments, comedic moments. When it started off, going in expecting a comedy, and it was Vince Vaughn, and the scenario is that he's a screw-up part of this family who owns a butcher shop in New York somewhere, and all the stuff that was trying to be wacky at the beginning was just stone-faced for me. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a rough ride. Then as it went on, I realized, well, this is really kind of a drama that has lighter moments in it. This is more like a heartfelt, yet another film about somebody who's middle-aged and a screw-up and is really a arrested development adolescent kind of thing.
Right after the end of this film, he's going to go apply for a job at Google, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You could tie these all together. So overall, I was okay with this movie.
Okay.
Once I said, okay, well, let's just put the comedy idea to bed. Because when it was trying to be funny, for the most part, it wasn't. It was occasionally. I like Vince Vaughn overall, but I think he makes bad movies about 99% of the time. And talking to one of my pals at the theater, we were saying, what was the last really funny movie Vince Vaughn made? And we were like, Swingers? And that's bad, because that was his first movie. So if you are looking, this is just me speaking now, this half of the room here, if you are looking for a decent date movie, something that's kind of heartfelt and kind of uplifting in a way, this ain't bad, I just don't expect a comedy. And I may rate this higher because it uses a T-Rex song at the end, under the end credits, and I'm a huge T-Rex fan, and I never expect to hear anything coming, let alone the song they used in this movie, coming out of theater speakers and surround. So that kind of left me with a smile. But this is a remake of a French-Canadian film from like 2 years ago called Starbuck. So if you want to do a before and after, there's a movie that's the exact same thing that's probably on your video store shelf, maybe at video headquarters of all places, that is the exact same thing, but with two guys speaking French.
Right. I certainly went into this with the same expectations, as you say. The trailer makes it look like it's going to be one of those, what we've come to expect from Vince Vaughn.
Fast-paced kind of thing.
Yeah, fast-paced, silly, funny lines going back and forth. And as you said, the first half hour, you've got other characters talking to him because he's such a screw-up. He works with his father's meat delivery company and butcher shop, and he's just such a failure. And all of his brothers are yelling stuff at him and throwing these quips off that just aren't funny. Right. And so you're right that once you get the idea that it isn't a comedy, it still feels very much, in my opinion, like a very paint-by-numbers kind of a cookie-cutter, get this out, the comment I said before, you folks came back to us was, I felt like Vince Vaughn should be part of the Avengers because here's another movie you got to shove out before the Avengers 2 gets out.
This is the comedy equivalent of a Thor movie?
Yeah, right, something like that. But I'm kind of wondering if, and I don't think he's the personality. I don't think he has the influence in Hollywood yet, like a Will Ferrell, to start to make these breaks. Because you see Ferrell doing some interesting stuff like Stranger Than Fiction, that are sort of comedic but more dramatic. I don't think Ferrell has the chops, no pun intended, because he's a meat delivery guy. So yeah, this one, as much as I have grown to sort of like him or maybe accept him, just kind of fell sort of flat. Everything felt, the lines and the jokes felt very cookie cutter. I'm sitting there at some dramatic moments and being a parent. There's some funny moments and some tender moments that I felt, I sort of like, I wasn't choking up, but I could tell that's what they wanted, and I wouldn't give it to them because I didn't respect the film enough. So it's just kind of nowhere in there. I think you're right that it's a perfectly innocuous date movie. There's nothing wrong with it for families or kids, but try something harder. You've got some decent talent. Nobody else really well known in this except for him. It's really his vehicle.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So I think as one of his venues, this isn't going to be real high on my marks.
No, and you saw it with your son. What did Walter think of this?
Oh, Walter wasn't too crazy about it either. Again, I think he went to it. He's pretty discerning. If it doesn't look funny, he doesn't want to go see it. So he was expecting that, and we both kind of just said,
Yeah.
Oh well, what was that all about?
Yeah, it's too bad because when it was trying to be funny, it's one of those movies where if you as an audience member are coming up with funnier lines and thinking of funnier things, the places this film could go that they don't, you're just like, oh, I don't want to be smarter than the movie, which sounds arrogant, but I'm just like, boy, if they had done this would have had a little bit more punch, or if they had avoided doing that, this would be better. I think if they had avoided trying the comedy at all, it would have been better. And
just play it as a straight kind of drama.
And so often Vince Vaughn does the fast-talking, used car salesman kind of thing, and he didn't really do that in this movie. And what little he did, again, it was like the writing wasn't there, or maybe he was adhering to lines that weren't good. I don't know.
Well, he's got these 533 kids, and he's trying to. He spends like an afternoon with each of them, and I guess dramatically that's supposed to make up for being absent in all of their lives. He has this relationship with this police officer. And he's in love with her. They're not married yet or anything like that, but they're having a kid together. And so she's not sure if she wants to stick around with him. And just all of the way that things work out, his explanation to her about how he's changed and all of his explanations to the kids are just so easy that that's what felt like. I think maybe I would have liked them to spend more time with a select few and imply that he's going to go ahead and do all of them. But it just felt the whole film felt a little bit too easy for me dramatically. So, sorry.
So, on that note, we thank our friends at
certainly.
Keene Cinemas for providing these films to us and the community at large. And and I had some great movie conversations with the guys there too.
Yep.
Before I went to see Delivery Man, we were all talking about Battle Royale because they asked me what I thought about Hunger Games, and I brought up Battle Royale, and a couple of them had actually watched Battle Royale the night before because they didn't want to see the new Hunger Games movie.
Well, I was a bit surprised, and maybe that's kind of why maybe both of us liked Delivery Man a little bit more than I think we were expecting it, because everybody there apologized to me before I went into Delivery Man.
I know. I get that once in a while. They say, "What are you seeing?" And I say, "Oh, whatever." And they say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And so we all joke about that. And then a lot of times they said that before Hit and Run, which is a movie I loved and still to this day. So anyway, we thank them there, and then we move along to thanking our friends at Video Headquarters for providing us with that which we are about to discuss, starting with the movie you're going to talk about right now.
I'm talking about it right now. Well, as we want to say, what are you going to do when you got an empty garage and you need like billions of dollars? Why don't you become a genius and a visionary? And you can do it pretty easily if your last name happens to be Jobs.
Hey.
Yes.
It's a film about fake facial hair. So I saw this in the theater.
Okay.
Alone. I'm not saying I went by myself to the theater. I'm saying I was the only one in the theater. Which was apparently not uncommon for when this played at Keene Cinemas.
Right.
I thought this was okay. Prefacing that with, I don't have any strong feelings about Ashton Kutcher, which some people do, and I don't know the story of this. I haven't read about Steve Jobs. I'm not an Apple maniac, though I do use an Apple computer. So for me, this was all just, what is this as a movie? So as a movie, it's a little... we were just talking about a scene toward the beginning where he's like all hippy-dippy and they're taking a trip or something, laying in the grass and being cool and stuff. And I'm like, oh, whoa, this is real TV movie kind of stuff here. But after that, it kind of moves on to a pretty, from my understanding when I've talked to people who know the story, this is a pretty surface, sky-high view of what went on. There's a lot of simplification and a lot of things are left out, but it's essentially true. They don't make Steve Jobs out to be this genius who thought up all this stuff. It seems from what we've gleaned that he was more of a guy who saw good ideas and helped see them to fruition. And he was the face man. He was the huckster for a lot of this stuff. So I think Kushner is fine in this. There are times where he's overdoing what apparently was the Steve Jobs walk, where it's kind of like he's doing Bigfoot a little bit, and that seems a little weird. But overall, I thought it was interesting, and it showed, it's sort of like in a way, a feel-good, American dream success story. Is this guy who was sort of a loser and decided to focus on something and just really took it farther than anybody ever would have imagined. Right. And it has really good music in it, at least in the theater.
You're happy with that?
It's sometimes it's whatever you can hook onto to enjoy, but I liked that too. So I thought it was fairly well shot and an interesting highlight version of the story. Right. Now, from everything I've heard, there's a movie that was done for TNT in the 90s called The Pirates of Silicon Valley, which is about the Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs thing. Apparently, that's the movie to see if you want the best version of this story. And I guess Steve Wozniak, who's portrayed in this film, has also said that's the movie to see. Video Headquarters does have a copy of that if somebody wants to see it. It is a VHS copy of that, which for a lot of people means it's the game over. But for people like me who like to keep your options open, I know I actually will be going there to rent that because everybody's talked about Pirates of Silicon Valley so much. I now want to see what that story is like. Right. But if you want a quick version with a pretty-looking guy in it and some good music, I think Jobs is probably the one to go.
Right. I think your comment that this is kind of the surface treatment of it is the most applicable. It's certainly enjoyable performances overall. I often feel that Kushner, and I don't have an issue with him. I think he is kind of sort of like the pretty boy of all of those out there. And I thought his performance, the walk you mentioned, but was often kind of clinical. I could see him trying to get down some mannerisms, but I tried to get over that. And if anything, this is an interesting look at the decades that went through there. You talk about the music and the look and feel and the dress and all that, and you feel kind of silly with the way people were dressing sometimes back then. But ultimately, and I'm not going to get into the Mac versus PC sort of a thing, which kind of the Gates and Jobs film, I understand, does. That's not what this is about. This follows him as you say, kind of certainly not a loser, but somebody who's trying to find his way. And boy, he finds the right track. And when he gets a hold of something, I really ended up. I've read a couple of books about it just because I was interested in him, in the man. And I just clearly got the sense, and you get a little bit of the sense here, that, boy, when he gets a hold of something, and your point is well taken that he doesn't necessarily dream up things. He's not an inventor, but he really is, and the term that they use is visionary. He sees a glimmer of something and knows where to take it. And that's what I was most impressed with. I thought this film got that across pretty well, and just was really impressive of what, as you say, the American success story, about what you can do with that. So I really ended up I ended up liking the film, certainly. It does feel sort of like a surface treatment, but it's certainly enjoyable, and not, there's nothing really offensive in it.
It doesn't paint him as the nicest guy in the world either. Right. It's not a rosy portrait of this guy descending from the heavens and touching everybody with a golden apple. He's kind of a, I can't use the word he's not a nice man for the most part in this film. Right. So, I guess we both agree.
I would think so. What a surprise.
So, speaking of historical figures, what do you do when you're a retired and extremely dangerous former government operative who was in a pretty successful movie a few years ago? Well, you get the band back together and you make a film called Red 2.
So I really loved the first one. Great fun with all of these characters, and they all blended so well. You've got a nice new mix with Anthony Hopkins as this kind of crazy inventor, and they have to go save him, which there's a little twist to all of that. So if you like the original Red, I think you're going to enjoy this. There's a lot of the same kind of just lighthearted humor, decent action. It's not terrific. I think the first one was really pretty clever, and so the cleverness has sort of worn off, and so they're kind of stuck with, gee, do we make this an action flick? Do we make it a comedy? I don't know. My biggest disappointment, strangely enough, was Mary Louise Parker, whom I like a lot. Originally, Bruce Willis is this retired and extremely dangerous guy who has this telephone relationship with her. She works in the government. And then she gets entangled in this web of intrigue. So she's this kind of silly, out-of-her-water fish who's brought along with all these killers. And now she's almost like an equal, and it just doesn't read well for me. So they spent so much time with her character, that was really kind of disappointing. So in the long run, I was slightly disappointed in this, in that I thought they did too much with some things and didn't do enough with others.
I agree on all points. I thought the first film was a great surprise. I wasn't expecting much out of it, and I thought it was a blast. This is still fun. It's big and loud and violent and silly and fun. Everybody in it, you like everybody who's in it for the most part. It's just lesser than. But it's still like, it's fun to see everybody again, you know? So it's one of those sequels that works on that level.
Do we equate it to like a Men in Black 2?
Kind of.
Similar to that?
Yeah, you know, it's not as good, but it's still fun.
Right.
It's certainly worth a rental. It's a great,
yeah.
I hate to say mindless because I think you shouldn't waste your time on things that are mindless, but it's a great, you don't have to think too much about it, rental for a weekend, you know? Mary Louise Parker was very annoying in this film to me.
Yeah, that's a good term.
I equate her like I did last week with the additional scientific characters in the Thor sequel. She's like this dumb person who's with all the badass people, and you're like, why don't they just lock her in a closet? You're safe. Don't make any noise.
Right.
We'll be back when the adventure is over. Because it's just constantly you're like, okay, now she's gonna not know how to do something, and she kind of is part of the team, as you say.
Well, they give her this assignment. It's like, my God, you're gonna screw it up.
So there's a little bit of cuteness with that, but overall it was annoying to me, which is too bad. Because it's just like you're going on a good rhythm, and then it's like, okay, now she has to be confused about something for a while, or skittish about a gun or something. And her performance was like she was drugged or something.
Right.
Not necessarily her, because I watched the gag reel, and like when her guard is down and she's not acting, she's cool. And I'm like, well, why is she acting like she's impaired in this movie?
Helen Mirren and Malkovich are always great. I love them.
Everybody in it is fun, and it's got a good look to it. Being a big action movie fan, I was a little disappointed in the action because there's this sequence you see a little bit of in the trailer where it's Mary Louise Parker and John Malkovich in a car, and they're chasing a guy on a motorcycle through the streets of Paris, and more time is spent looking at them in the car talking to each other than what's going on. And it's this modern school of action, second unit or whatever, shooting and editing, where something is going on, and it's shot better than a lot of stuff is now, but the editing is so lame. It's like you don't see the guy jump. Okay, the guy on a motorcycle goes down a staircase, and the car starts to follow them. And the second the car does that, they cut away to something else. I'm like, you know what I would be impressed by? Seeing a car drive down a flight of stairs, because I don't see that in town where I live every day. And
you don't live in my neighborhood.
Well, hey, because you live in Danger Town. So it's one of those things where, is this an action movie or is this a comedy? This is pretty much a comedy with a lot of explosions. And you have the Korean, I think, hitman who's in this, who's really cool and badass. He was in the Green Hornet, and he was in the G.I. Joe movies as Storm Shadow. He's great, and he does some really cool foo. But again, he starts to do something cool, and they cut away to somebody falling into a pile of boxes, and it's like, you know, he's actually doing something. He was in the same room as the camera doing that something. Maybe you might want to show us that's something that he did. Right. So that just annoys me a little bit. But having said all of that, it's still a fun movie. It's still a better movie than Thor 2 was.
Right.
For me. So I think if you like the first Red, the second Red is certainly a good rental. I wouldn't necessarily blind buy it.
Are we going to see Red 3? I'm not quite so sure after
Although
this one.
I'd be up for it, honestly.
Oh, yeah, I would too. But in box office, I think it did fairly well. So our last film.
Our last film. Okay. So what do you do when you got a hot car and there's a woman in trouble? You better plan The Getaway. Ethan Hawke pops the clutch and tells the world to eat his dust.
There you go. I like Ethan Hawke and Selena Gomez quite a bit. So what'd you think?
Well, I didn't see it.
Strangely enough, I didn't see it either.
Oh.
Because they didn't have it. I guess not to make light, but I guess out in the Midwest with all of the terrible tornadoes and everything. I guess their video headquarters distribution house got hit pretty much directly. So there are a lot of DVDs flying all over the place, I guess. But
it's raining DVDs somewhere.
We were unable to watch this, so maybe we'll talk about it at a future date.
I like car movies, muscle car movies and stuff, mostly 70s era, and I'm always yearning for a film to recapture that, and I think Hit and Run did several years ago. So this actually is one that I will pay my own money to rent because I want to see it. It's a car movie.
It's a unique situation.
So yeah, you'd think the advantage normally of having a distributor that's in the middle of the U.S. is that it's a shorter trip for them to get the videos to you and everything. Unfortunately, having one in Tornado Alley kind of hosed them. So they were saying to me on Friday that they were hoping they would get their new releases by today.
For Tuesday,
for Tuesday. So I said, that's fine with me.
Right.
Makes my weekend a little lighter. And my main thing is I want them to stay in business. So I hope that everything works out well for them.
Oh, yeah.
So The Getaway and a couple other things. The Canyons, the controversial micro-budgeted Paul Schrader featuring Lindsay Lohan and a male porn star doing some dirty stuff, if that is the kind of thing you're into. That is also out on Tuesday this week.
Right.
And I was curious about that, kind of morbidly curious, honestly. Paul Schrader's done some great stuff in the past. This just sounds weird to me, so I'm curious, but I don't know if I'm curious enough to actually rent it. I'd rather watch, seriously, Herbie Fully Loaded again, because I really like that movie a lot. So that's all we really have to discuss this week, unless there was anything else you wanted to get off your chest.
No, well, not really. Not at this point in time. So, kind of a light week this week, and we've actually got quite a bit going on. Video headquarters, but Keene Cinema is getting 3 new movies middle of the week. Mm-hmm. So that'll be available and give some folks some things to do if you happen to be around in our area for the holidays.
Right, and we'll be talking a lot faster next Monday.
Yes, because we'll have 3 in the theaters and probably 3 or 4 on video. So you won't get to the kind of lightweight, relaxed Mark and Tom next week. No.
We'll be a-sweating. So I guess until next Monday, I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we're the Cinemaniacs.
Bye.